This is a test to make sure that I can get this to work. It's through Restream, through my browser. 720p would be the camera resolution, and I was interested in trying to get this to work, to hear what it would sound like, and to just see if I can do it. I'm not very into podcasting, especially not the software side of things. So this is a test. I'm going to see if I can figure this out. Should be live now on the channel, and I have no idea how to make it private. So we're going to see if this works, test it out, talk about things, and then go from there. I see a customize option here. No clue what that says. If as far as adding an avatar, I have no idea. It is extremely early, almost 2 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Coast. So I don't expect anybody to know that this is happening. I certainly don't know if the comments or the chat works. It says that it is. Megatron is here. Testing 1, 2, 3. Hey, does it sound okay? Is it working well? I'm not sure. I'm using Restream. Happy New Year to you too. Thank you for stopping by. So hopefully this is working. I know the cam. I know how to get the cam to work. You just sort of click it, and there I am. Very, very early, wearing reedies because I'm old. And then you click it again, and you have just the avatar. I'm not sure how to add an avatar. You probably have to pay to do that. So let's start talking about Xbox. It's rough. Thank you. It sounds great. I'm happy that the chat is working. I over the holiday I visited family, and my 10-year-old nephew is playing his PlayStation 5, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching him, and he has 100 friends on his friends list, which is insane to me. And I'm watching him, and I start asking him about, the games he plays. Why did he get a PlayStation 5? And he really didn't know. Basically, it was just that his friends had it. But what was interesting is they were all playing Fortnite. And when I asked him about other games that he played, he literally said he only wants one other game, and that's NBA 2K. I asked him about Last of Us. I asked him about the upcoming Intergalactic, Ratchet and Clank. You name the big PlayStation heavy hitters. Nobody knew what these games were. His friends online were just like, some of them knew about them, but they really just didn't care. It was all about Fortnite. So we had to leave and go pick up some food. He comes with me. He brings his phone, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching him, and he's playing Fortnite on his phone with the people he was playing with on his PlayStation 5. And I started to think, maybe Xbox has got some things right. And I know it's very, very difficult being a fan of Xbox when you see the news, especially, I think it was yesterday, the sales for November were just, it was unbelievable with the launch of the PlayStation 5 Pro, putting PlayStation 5 for that month I think it's over 4 million. I hope I'm right, because it sounds like a lot for a month. But I saw some chart and it was 4 million, and the Xbox was, I think, 800,000. And you start thinking to yourself, how could they possibly continue in this space? But then I started to think about, if you're subscribed to Game Pass, most of the subscribers are on console. Some of them are on PC. I don't know how many people are on PC. You would think that's the largest base for Game Pass because there are a gazillion PCs out there. But what happens to people who are subscribed on Game Pass if the hardware goes away? What happens to people who have digital libraries like myself? I have over 1,000 games on the Xbox right now on my Series X. When I click full library in the settings, what happens to all those games? Where do they go? Do I have access to them? The idea of buying a streaming stick, to me, isn't letting them off the hook as far as access goes. So it's very interesting to think about some of the things that Microsoft has done as being detrimental to the hardware. But when I looked at this kid playing Fortnite on a PlayStation 5, not caring about Spider-Man, not caring about Last of Us, Ratchet and Clank, I started to think, well, maybe they got some things right in terms of the future. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But it is very difficult to be a fan of Xbox and just look at what's going on and being excited about it. Now, I watched the video of the guy who never touched an Xbox before, right? I never touched an Xbox. I don't know about the Xbox. I don't care about the Xbox. Never did. Hold on one second while I take a sip of coffee. And I get that, all the things that the system and the console brings to to the forefront are all brand new to that guy who made the video, a longtime PlayStation fan, tries Xbox for the first time. All of those things are brand new to him. Megatron1 says, my kids are the same: Fortnite, Roblox, and Call of Duty. That's it. Yeah, right? Call of Duty. Microsoft, right there. So for him to experience these things brand new, he was blown away by them, right? The quick resume, the ability to just play older games, have access to them. They're upscaled, they look better, auto HDR, all of this stuff, the controller with the offset sticks, all of the stuff that he finds incredibly compelling for the first time are things that I grew up with, right? These are things that I was playing on Xbox before their inception. Then they gave them to people and I tried them and I played them. But then recently I sort of walked away from Microsoft. I haven't really played my Xbox Series X that much because of just the constant reality that they're not getting it done. And it's difficult when you purchase something or you have something and you know that the majority of people in the world don't use it. There's like a psychological component to it where you feel like you're an idiot for enjoying it. And I get all that, right? But for somebody like me, I watched his video and then I had that experience with my nephew during the holidays, and I thought to myself, well, why am I so against just enjoying the Xbox? So I started to play it, went back to it a bit. Believe it or not, the Starfield DLC by Bethesda, the Doom crossover, I played that last night, and I have to tell you, it's just so much fun. It's just fun. Is it a game that has problems? Yes. Is it a game that is on the same level of quality as these huge AAA games with expensive budgets? Probably not. But I found instances in this game where it's just breathtaking to look at. It really is. And the DLC is like Event Horizon, the movie. I don't want to spoil it for you, but the basic premise of that movie is that they find a way to travel at a speed that isn't light speed, but rather fold space and time, and they wind up somewhere else. Well, it's kind of like that, but it is so, so good that I wish it was longer. And then I started to play, other games. Like I had the Star Wars Outlaws video that I put up, and it just arguably looks better on the Xbox Series X than the base PS5. And it's not that way for every game, but I found it at least compelling enough to say to myself, well, a lot of this sort of hate isn't really that I hate the Xbox. It's just that when you're constantly exposed to things that are concerning, right? I'm not trying to say that selling less than everybody else isn't a concern, because it is, but the nature of social media, it's either really, really positive news that you're exposed to over and over and over again, or really negative news. And it does weigh on people. I get it. I'm not immune to advertising, or I'm not immune to the constant social media negativity when it comes to products. So that sort of steered me away from Xbox for a while. As somebody who's got like 140,000 gamer score, I definitely use the Xbox quite a bit. But there was a first party problem. There was a first party perception problem. They're two different things. There's a first party problem, and then there's the perception that their first party is just terrible, which, it isn't. And then there's the whole, well, they purchased all these studios, they don't get credit for them. But, this isn't the world we live in. When you buy something, if somebody's great and you buy them, that's your thing. It's kind of like that with sports, right? You have a sucky team, they go out, they draft someone who's like incredible. All of a sudden, they get credit for it. They're a great team. So I have to say, there's a lot of positives when it comes to Xbox, but the one thing I'm really, really concerned about is somebody who's got a lot invested in this console and this brand, and I still have tons invested in PlayStation. Look, I've been on PlayStation since PlayStation 1. I've been around a long time. So the idea of a console brand coming and going in terms of hardware isn't something that's foreign to me. I lived through, buying a Sega Master System, then a Genesis, and then every single ridiculous add-on. I lived through the inadequacies of Sega of Japan and Sega of America battling back and forth with one another, leading to the demise of that entire hardware brand. So it's not something that's foreign to me, but I do feel like when it comes to Xbox, if Sega had the money that Microsoft has, they would probably hang around much longer, probably do what Microsoft is doing. So let's look at these two strategies: Microsoft and their first party. You buy an Xbox piece of hardware. They have games that their first party makes. Now, the idea of exclusivity, what happens if nothing is exclusive? Who would care about buying an Xbox? Let's explore that for a second without any emotion attached to it. You have to have an inherent value when it comes to anything, right? Everything that you purchase in life, that's the purpose of advertising, to highlight something that makes you purchase something else, to highlight a strength over something else. If you're two products in a market, you have to market yourself in a way that shows your strength versus the other thing, because people might not buy your thing. So the idea of exclusivity and its value are definitely something that are real. I'm not trying to discount that. I come from a generation where you purchased systems for their exclusives. I got my Sega Master System for Phantasy Star. I purchased my PlayStation 1 for their countless third-party exclusives. At the time, they didn't have a lot of first-party studios. They went around and made deals to get third parties on the platform, which was smart. Then PlayStation 2 had a ton of exclusives that were mostly third-party. My Xbox came out, and Sega went to Xbox early on with some titles. That's why I went there. But exclusivity absolutely matters. So if Xbox decides to put all their games on PlayStation, I hear it all the time. Why would you buy an Xbox if all of those games are on PlayStation? And that's a valid concern. I can't discount that. But when you look at maybe what Microsoft did, right? Divorce yourself from your console warring and your emotions. The inherent value in exclusivity was sort of supplemented by this this subscription service, Game Pass. So the idea is that these exclusives will go other places, but for for $20 a month, the inherent exclusive value of those games is still there, or at least that's what they hope, right? They hope that looking at somebody who never wanted to play Xbox games on the PlayStation that's all of a sudden excited to play them now because they're $70 a pop is a little strange. And you have another group of people that are only paying $20 a month to play those exclusives, in addition to a lot of other stuff that month that maybe the people over on the PlayStation still have to pay full price for. I'll give you an example. Still Wakes the Deep came out, and I played it on Game Pass. Now, that's one of the best games I played last year. It's an incredible game. It's a $30 title if you purchase it. I also played some games on Game Pass like Starfield, right? That's a $70 purchase if you purchase it. So you're looking at over $100, right, with tax, way over $100. So for me, I spent $20 and I got Still Wakes the Deep and Starfield. Now, if I was on PlayStation and I was excited and I was like, all these exclusives are coming, there's no reason to own an Xbox, I would have to pay over $100 for that. In addition to know that Still Wakes the Deep was a game that I would like to play. So the idea of ease of use and not a lot of investment up front from you to try something is there with Game Pass. The problem with that inherent value and that idea that you're not paying $70 a pop at someone else's is that it doesn't look like consumers care, right? It just doesn't look like they care that they can save money with Game Pass versus just buy a PlayStation and play exclusive PlayStation games when they come out. And then if you want to, pay $70 a pop for Xbox games. Take Call of Duty, for instance. Call of Duty dropped. It's in Game Pass. Now, I don't think it helped Game Pass at all. And I'm not sure about the sales split, but I can be pretty confident in saying that it's probably huge on PlayStation still. And there are probably quite a few people playing it through Game Pass, but I don't know enough in terms of the metrics, in terms of the numbers, to say that Game Pass helps or Game Pass is offsetting that lack of exclusive feature of the software on one platform versus the exclusive feature of you paying $20 and somebody else paying 70. Excuse me, I have to take a drink. So there's tons of things to consider. But when you get to the sales of something, right? If you're not selling, if you're consistently declining, then the market isn't interested in what you have to offer, even with that exclusive feature that you think would be the offset. Now with Sony, it's completely different, right? You buy a PlayStation 5 and everything that Sony first party does, you're going to pay at least $70 for it. There might be a special edition that's over 100 that you purchase, but the rub is that you're going to pay $70 for that game. And if you notice, some of these big first party Sony studios, they haven't really done much exclusive on the PlayStation 5 this generation. You take Naughty Dog. What did they do during the PlayStation 2 generation? They did Jack 1, Jack 2, Jack 3, Jack X Combat Racing. They did 4 games. Take Sucker Punch. They did Sly 1, Sly 2, Sly 3. Now you fast forward to PlayStation 3, you've got Naughty Dog doing Uncharted 1, Uncharted 2, Uncharted 3. 3 big tentpole franchises in one generation. Now here we are in 2025 with the PlayStation 5, and these studios, the only thing that they've really done is highlight the PlayStation 4 offerings and make them better on the PlayStation 5. So you've got remasters, remakes of games, but you don't really have actual new IP built from the ground up for the PlayStation 5. You're going to get Sony first-party AAA games about 5 years into the life cycle of the PlayStation 5. And I think you're only going to get one. Naughty Dog's only going to do, what's the name of it? I keep saying Interstellar. I think it's Intergalactic. So they're only going to do one PlayStation 5 game this generation. Now think about that. Think about the offering that Microsoft and Xbox have with all of these studios dropping games. Like, for instance, you're going to get South of Midnight, you're going to get Fable, you're going to get Perfect Dark. These games are going to drop, albeit not all at once, but you're going to get them within a generation. And for Sony, their first-party studios are going to make one proper game for a system that you purchase in a generation, the entire generation. And then inevitably, you're going to buy a PlayStation 6 and you're going to get the remastered version of Intergalactic or the remastered version of Ghost of Yotai, while these studios wait or buy themselves time for the system to get an install base that warrants the exclusive title coming 5 or 6 years in. I'm not sure that, if you step away from the console wars, that's not really a compelling offering, waiting for that stuff. Now, of course, you're going to get third-party games. They're going to drop on the system. And I think the name brand of PlayStation built up over the years sort of mitigates that waiting for first party for 5 or 6 years for some people. And maybe the Game Pass offering, and when games start to drop, they can communicate that in a better way. Maybe the next Xbox is a little bit more successful. I don't know. That's a lot of maybes. But at the end of the day, before the announcement today that Sony was thinking about reaching back to old IP that were a little bit smaller, that they can put a little bit less money into, but still be creative and drop them at a more consistent cadence in between this huge time that you're waiting for these exclusive AAA Sony blockbusters. Before that announcement, I thought they were in a situation that they were going to have to rely on the name brand and people just loving PlayStation for a long, long time if the competition had more games dropping at a consistent rate. So if they do that, if they have these smaller titles, if they reach back and they start creating these smaller titles like a new Jack and Daxter game, but using an engine that doesn't cost a lot of money, selling it for $60 or I think that's going to help them. I think it's going to help them to have more content while you're waiting for these bigger games. So if that happens, then the idea that Microsoft has all these games dropping into a subscription service might not be something Sony should worry about. And again, I don't think they have to worry about much when it comes to what Microsoft is doing. Not because some of the stuff that Microsoft is doing isn't great. It's just people don't really seem to care. They just don't. And, there's nothing I can do about that. There's nothing you can do about that. The world has chosen, and there's a small base of consumer that buys Xbox. I don't know if that's going to be enough for Microsoft to continue to make a piece of hardware. Now, there's Game Pass subscribers on console. Where do they go if Microsoft gets out of the hardware space? What happens to you who subscribes to Game Pass? What happens to your digital library of games that you purchased over the years that just work? That's another feature that I was sort of reintroduced to. I sort of forgot about all of this stuff, but I turned the Xbox on. I go into my digital library. There's Half-Life 2, the orange box that I purchased on the Xbox 360. It's there. There's some original Xbox games. There's most of my Xbox 360 games. I have some Xbox 360 games. I pull the disc out, put it in, it just works. My PlayStation 3 library is gone when it comes to Sony and PlayStation 5. It doesn't exist. And I reject the idea that it doesn't matter, that it's all about the new stuff, because there is no new stuff. We're waiting for that stuff. I would love to go back and play some of the great classics from Naughty Dog, from Insomniac, from Sucker Punch. But I can't unless I want to stream this stuff, and I don't want to do that. The idea of native play is a strength for Microsoft. But again, when I looked at all these strengths, this rediscovery of Xbox, and having fun with it, I still am struck with the idea that most people don't seem to care. They just don't. The PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 5 Pro, it's a huge, huge success and a huge month for Sony. They're closing in on 70 million consoles sold. And I mean, they're probably going to keep this thing around for a long time. They announced that the support for the PlayStation 5 was going to be extremely long and well into the PlayStation 6 life cycle. So again, you have this idea that even though you buy a PlayStation 6, you're going to get games that are really skewing and built for the PlayStation 5, and then you're going to get the better version on PlayStation 6 until those first parties decide to make their games. So in between all that time, these smaller IPs that Sony may go back to is a smart idea. If that happens and PS3 emulation happens, which is another thing that I want to talk about, if all of that happens, then a lot of these strengths that Microsoft and Xbox have, they'll still exist, but I'm not sure users are going to notice or care. And that's another issue that Microsoft has. They can't communicate the idea of why their strengths are sexy. They're not an entertainment company. They have no clue how to make an ad that says Game Pass for $20 versus $70 one-off titles. Like, how do you make an ad? How do you do that? This is how you share your games on PS4. Thanks. Like, brilliant ad like that demonstrates the clear-cut advantage that one system has over another. And the idea that there are no clear-cut advantages that Xbox has over PlayStation, it's ridiculous. Look, I get it. Social media, and there are a lot of advantages PlayStation 5 has, but clearly there are some advantages that Xbox has. But I don't think people care. So at the end of the day, what do they do? What do they do next generation? Do they make another piece of hardware that's the most powerful Xbox ever? There's rumors that they're going to be a hybrid system. They're going to be open source. I saw a rumor that said, well, you're going to buy an Xbox and you're going to be able to buy games through Steam. You're going to be able to play PlayStation games because they're on PC, and you're going to be able to play your Game Pass games if you're subscribed, and also buy games. That's another perk with Game Pass that I see a lot of people talk about. You don't own your games. Well, if you sub to Game Pass, you can try those games. And guess what? You can still purchase them. And if you're a subscriber, you get them for a discount. So you never pay $70. Another advantage that they just can't communicate to people. But, what happens to these games that you purchase? What happens to all of this stuff, your digital library? Well, if they go open source, that sounds great, right? Why wouldn't you buy an Xbox to subscribe to Game Pass to get a discount on new games if you want to purchase them? You never pay $70 to play Steam games, to purchase and download through Steam, and to play PlayStation games because they're on PC. Why wouldn't you do that? I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know how my digital library on Xbox somehow migrates between the two. For me, it wouldn't matter because I'm never going to touch a PC to play video games. So it might be a compelling offering, especially for these young kids who are just playing Fortnite, who are just playing NBA 2, to purchase something like that, right? I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think that with the advent of purchasing all these studios, you're starting to see a lot of content in the pipeline that's going to drop into the subscription service. And I think Microsoft clearly thinks that that's compelling enough to mitigate the lack of exclusivity when it comes to putting these games everywhere else. I think they're hoping that people are going to say to themselves, well, wait a minute. I can subscribe to Game Pass, play Perfect Dark, play Fable, play Starfield, play South of Midnight for $20 a month. And let's say it takes 6 months for those games to come out, right? You're still spending much less. I think 4 months of Game Pass is the equivalent of one $70 purchase with tax of a game. I think Microsoft thinks people are going to see that and say to themselves, I think that's a good strategy. I don't think anybody outside of video games would look at that and say to themselves, no, that's not a good idea. No, that's not a great value. I think most people would say, yeah, that makes sense. But when you look at what consumers are choosing, they just don't care. Now, is that a fact? Is that a factor that Microsoft can't communicate that to people? Or is it a factor that people just don't care? Now, I think it's both. It is baffling to me when I see people say, "Well, I'm going to get these games." Like, I just take me for instance, right? I have a PlayStation 5. Why in the world would I spend $70 on Perfect Dark or Starfield or South of Midnight when I can just drop a 20 and play these games? Why would I do that? Now, if I like these games, right? If I really like them, like it's a game like Starfield that's going to be around for a while, I can purchase it at a discount that I don't get anywhere else because I'm a Game Pass subscriber. Would I do that? I don't know. Would most consumers do that? The answer is no, because they're not doing it. They're simply waiting. And an example of this is the biggest game around, Call of Duty. They purchased this game on the PlayStation 5. They're not saying to themselves, wait, you mean for $20 I can download Call of Duty right now and play it through Xbox? The big loss of exclusivity for Microsoft would be if Xbox Game Pass went to PlayStation, because then there really isn't an advantage to Xbox Game Pass on a dedicated piece of hardware called an Xbox. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon unless hardware goes away. Then Game Pass becomes just like EA Access or Ubisoft Plus, whatever it's called. It can exist everywhere. And then you'd probably see a huge uptick in people subscribing. Let's get back to PlayStation Plus and these smaller games that Sony may be dipping back into. I said for a long time, the wait between these huge AAA games is too long. It's just too long. And people use costs as the excuse. And, I'm not saying that isn't an excuse, but it's just too long. So Sony dipping back into these smaller titles makes a lot of sense to fill in the void between these two titles, to give people these almost art house projects that still skew Sony and PlayStation and creative, but don't cost a ton of money. But here's the rub, right? Let's say that they decide that all of these smaller marquee Sony exclusive titles that they're going to create, all of these titles that they're going to look at, let's say all of them end up in PlayStation Plus as a driver for that. But they say to you, the big AAA games that we're working on, those will be the ones you have to purchase. Well, think about that for a second. How long do you think that'll work? How long do you think it'll take before people say to themselves, and this is where you have to be careful, because they may cultivate an audience that says to themselves, while PlayStation Plus is incredible, all of these exclusive Sony IPs from the past, they're creating them. They don't cost a lot of money if I want to purchase them. Let's say they're 40 or 50 or $60, but I can subscribe to PlayStation Plus. It's much more attractive now. But now I have to pay $70 for this AAA game. Why isn't it in PlayStation Plus? That's something that they have to worry about. You have to balance that very carefully, because you can create an audience that has an expectation of everything being in a subscription service. And if you don't think that can happen, just take a look at Xbox. Look at third-party sales on the Xbox. Now, I did see an article that said Indiana Jones and its launch week was like number 2 in terms of sales. So I'm not 100% saying that Game Pass completely hurts sales, because I don't know, right? As somebody who just plays video games and hears about things, personally, I hear that and I say to myself, well, why would you buy it? I didn't buy Starfield. Take a look at me, for example. I didn't buy Starfield. I didn't buy Still Wakes the Deep. I didn't buy any of the games that I played on Game Pass. I just didn't purchase them. So clearly it affects some people. PlayStation is still obviously a place where a la carte sales matter. I think that every single time a list comes up with sales, that demonstrates that that's a fact. So I think Sony needs to be careful, because a lot of these smaller titles, I don't mean smaller in terms that they don't matter. So for instance, like, let's say they reach back and you get a new Jet Moto, or you get something like another Jack and Daxter, or they just create something whimsical and fun again from these studios that are exclusive. Are they going to work at $60 a pop, at $50 a pop, maybe even $70 a pop? Are they going to work? And at some point, Do you feel like they need something like these titles in their subscription service to drive the adoption of it? Because they're only on PlayStation consoles. They're not on PC yet with PlayStation Plus. And if they do that, again, let's say that they create a new Jack and Daxter, doesn't cost them a lot of money. They make it to fill the gap between these huge AAA games. Let's say you get another, just pick a Sony IP from the past, right? They make it, doesn't cost them a lot of money, but it still looks amazing. It still plays amazing. It's very fun. It's got that Sony PlayStation tagline on it, and they release it, and eventually people buy it, or they decide that themselves these smaller titles can exist in PlayStation Plus as a driver. But we're sure that people aren't going to get upset by that when we launch Intergalactic at $70 and it isn't in the PlayStation Plus catalog. I don't know. They got to be careful. Microsoft's decided to say, we don't care about your feelings. We don't care about exclusivity. We don't care about this console war stuff, even though I think it's not just console wars when it comes to exclusivity, because I mean, I just look around in my life. Everything that I purchase, everything that I look at has an inherent value compared to something else that's trying to sell to me. Whether or not I go buy a car, whether or not I buy a television, anything, right? My favorite sports team. Why do they go out and spend so much money on these players to sign them exclusively to the city if it doesn't matter? They do it because they want to put people in the seats to make more money, and they want to position themselves to win a championship. It's the same thing with everything else. But with software, it seems like things are changing. Definitely a generation after me just doesn't care. And I saw that with my nephew. He just doesn't care. He doesn't even know why he has a PlayStation 5, honestly. He just bought it because his friends have it. And what's interesting is there's a Switch sitting in the corner. Everybody buys a Nintendo platform. And he's also looking at a gaming PC, which, at some point I feel like maybe Microsoft's idea, maybe its strategy is going to end up being the winning strategy. It's just that, if you had to take a crude analogy, Microsoft takes you out, takes you to Burger King, throws a couple burgers down your throat, takes you home, and wham, bam, thank you, man. Whereas Sony's like, we're going to go out to this nice restaurant. I'm going to take you out. We're going to date for a while, 6 months, a year. I'm going to treat you very well. But then eventually, guess what's going to happen? Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. So it's just a different approach. Sometimes I think Microsoft's right, but sometimes it's really, really hard to be excited about turning the damn Xbox on, and especially spending $70 on a title there when I don't know if it's going to be there, if they get out of hardware. What do I do? I'm not buying an Amazon stick and plugging it into my television and signing into Xbox Live and being like, there's my library. Isn't that great? I don't want to do that shit. So there's a ton of things to consider. Absolutely a ton of things to consider when it comes to PlayStation and Xbox. 30 million consoles, I think. PlayStation's closing in on 67 or 68. Xbox is like 32. Now, 32 million consoles isn't something to sneeze at, especially when you can monetize people through subscription services. And I wonder if that's enough for Microsoft. I wonder if the games that they release on PlayStation are successful. I wonder if that's enough to subsidize everything to keep it going. And I want to touch on the whole games are coming to PlayStation for $70. Why would I buy an Xbox thing again? Think about this. When Call of Duty came out and everybody said it was going to PlayStation gets 30% of every sale. They're going to use that 30% to put Microsoft out of business. Well, how much do you need to add to 30 to get to 100? 70. Microsoft gets 70% of every purchase on PlayStation. Couldn't they just use that money too? So when you think about this stuff, without being a fanatic, there are some upsides to Microsoft making more money than PlayStation and Sony can make with their first-party games. Because, think about it. When Intergalactic launches, it's going to be 6 years into the PlayStation 5 life cycle. How much time do they need to recoup the cost of Intergalactic? Longer than the PlayStation 5 life cycle. They got to sell at least, 10, 15, 20 million consoles? 20 million sales of the copy, individual sales. How many copies do they need to sell to break even? How many do they need to sell to start making a profit? So that's why this strategy of putting games everywhere, putting yourself in a position to make the most money, minus the sentiment and the feelings of a consumer base, makes sense. At the same time, there's the feelings and sentiment of a consumer base. And if you do it wrong, those consumers will go somewhere else, even if the other place they're going eventually does the same thing. It's not what you do, it's how you do it that's important. And I think Sony understands that in a way that Microsoft never can or could. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I think I certainly don't think 32 million is anything to sneeze at. I think the largest base of subscribers for Game Pass are clearly on the console, and that's another plus minus because if you're excited about that and you think that that's the metric that means they're going to create more hardware, then ask yourself, where's the audience on PC, which is the largest in terms of availability of people to subscribe to something? The more people that are somewhere, the more chances you have to get them to give you money with anything, especially a subscription service. So if Game Pass won't grow on console because the console isn't selling, and we don't know what the subscriber cutoff is on PC, is it growing? Is it stagnating? Then what is the cutoff for this stuff to make sense, to subsidize everything that Microsoft is doing? I don't know. Smarter people than me are doing this at Microsoft, so maybe they know something I don't. Maybe 32 million people, out of that 32 million people, let's say 20 million are subscribed to Game Pass. Maybe it fluctuates every month the same way it does with every subscription service like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime. Maybe that's enough of a revenue stream to subsidize what they're doing with Game Pass. Add in the fact that they're going to put these games on PlayStation for $70 a pop. If you go out and you purchase them and you say, look at me, I'm playing Xbox games on my PlayStation. You gave them $70. The other people are giving them $20. So even if you're, step away from everything for a second, ask somebody who knows nothing about video games and present that situation to them. Nobody's going to pay $70 when they don't have to. Again, it all comes down to the perception. And the perception is that Xbox as a platform is failing. I'm not going to dance around that. That's clearly something that's happening. And it affects consumer confidence. And that's something that once you lose consumer confidence, there isn't really a way back. And I'll give you an example. Most of the games I played on the Xbox 360 were on PC. I didn't care about it. Nobody I knew cared about it. We were Xbox 360 gamers. Gears of War, Xbox 360. Doesn't matter that it was on PC. Take a look at how many Xbox 360s people purchased after the Red Ring of Death. I know people that went through 6. And you ask them, why do you keep buying it? Why don't you just buy a PlayStation 3? And it's because of that expectation. It's because of the games. It's because it was where everyone was. It's because the Xbox 360 launched first. It's because it got de facto exclusives like Mass Effect and BioShock. It's because games looked better on the Xbox 360. So consumers were confident in the fact that that was the place where they were going to get the best experiences, irregardless of the failure rate. Fast forward to today. The Xbox Series X and S are some of the most in terms of the experience, it's super, super quiet. I can't even hear the damn thing. It functions like a dream. There's not a lot of problems with it, but that consumer confidence is gone. And people just don't care about all of the other benefits that I talked about. The idea of Game Pass, the idea of your library of games from the original Xbox all the way up till now, just being able to be played on the system. No one cares because that consumer confidence is gone. They're a long way away from a 60% failure rate and people just saying, oh, well, I'll buy another Xbox 360. They're a long way away from that to where they are now with two reasonably well put together consoles that nobody wants because of the perception issue. Now, it's not just perception. There are better games on the PlayStation 5. But again, Sony lives and dies by a lot of these third-party games identifying with the platform. Most people think Resident Evil, they think PlayStation. Most people think Tomb Raider, they think PlayStation. Most people think Final Fantasy, they think PlayStation. And there's a reason for that. And those games buy their first-party time to create. So there's a lot of pluses in the Sony camp, and there's a few pluses in the Xbox camp that many people just discount that I'm rediscovering as somebody who's been around for a long time and jumped into the PlayStation again with the PlayStation 5. PlayStation 4, I was sort of back and forth. The Xbox One launched with better software, better games. PlayStation 4 really picked it up. And again, the price, the Xbox One problems, I get it. That's when Xbox lost me. They sort of found me again during this generation with some stuff, and that's where I am. I want them to be better. I would like them to sell more. I'd have more confidence, surely, than I have now. Um, but the strengths they have versus the strength Sony has, I think in the end, eventually, I think Sony is going to have to find a way to sort of find a longer tail when it comes to revenue for these first party games. Again, Intergalactic, how much money are they spending to create that game? That game's going to come out at the tail end of the PlayStation 5 life cycle. Let's say maybe they have 4 more years left in it when Intergalactic comes out. Okay, over time, Intergalactic will sell probably a lot. How many copies did Last of Us sell on the PlayStation 4? How many copies did Last of Us 2 sell? So I don't know. I don't know if that strategy is better than releasing Intergalactic and also releasing it on PC the same day, and then also maybe in the future releasing Intergalactic on other systems, or putting it in a subscription service to drive more adoption of it and to drive more monthly revenue. That would seem to make sense to me. So I don't know how long that's going to take. PlayStation is like, I think about Underworld, the movie Underworld, where the vampires, like the head vampires would say, one of us is awake and 2 of us are asleep, and we leapfrog through the centuries. Well, it seems like Sony's going that route where you've got the PlayStation 4, and then the PlayStation 4 is supported well into the life cycle of the PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 5 is asleep for a long time. 5 years in, all of a sudden, the PlayStation 5 awakes, and the PlayStation 4 goes to sleep finally, and we start getting games for the PlayStation 5. And then the same thing will happen with the PlayStation 6. How long can that strategy sustain itself versus this everything, everywhere money that conceivably Microsoft may be making? And the only reason I say that is because it seems like tons of PlayStation fans are very excited to give Microsoft $70 a pop for their games. And these are games that nobody ever wanted before, but now they want them because they're available on PlayStation. So I think that's great. I would like to see Starfield on the PlayStation 5 and use the DualSense controller. Maybe the next Gears E-Day launches on PlayStation. Maybe they're making Gears E-Day the start of the Gears franchise to introduce Gears to a new audience. Did you ever think of that? And if it goes to PlayStation again, $70 versus $20 in Game Pass. The problem is most people aren't buying Xboxes for Game Pass. I don't think most people are buying PCs for Game Pass. I don't think a lot of people are subscribing to Game Pass through console, obviously, because no one's buying the console. They're buying it, but it's the same audience over and over and over again. And when Phil Spencer says you either need to change or get more from the audience, I think we're at that point now where they're going to have to start fleecing a bit more out of the audience that's already there. And how does that work for the perception when it comes to being a fan of Xbox? I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of this stuff. It's stuff that I think about. When I say worry about it, there's tons of stuff in life that are more important than this, but it is interesting. It's interesting how they have so many things that are a perceived strength. I keep going back to the access of old games, the backwards compatibility. The offset sticks are a subjective thing, but it's more comfortable. Xbox Live, the download speeds are just higher for some reason, and it's not my router. I have gigabit internet. It's just faster. Not that PlayStation is slow. It's just a reality. So there are tons. Game Pass, right? Game Pass is an advantage. And if you want to own your games, you don't have to rent them through Game Pass. You can subscribe. You can play some games through Game Pass, or you can get that discount for purchasing. So you can still purchase games. I see that a lot. People say, well, I don't want to rent games. Well, you don't have to. But the perception is that you only rent games on Xbox. You see what I mean when it comes to that perception thing? You can also buy them. And then the next critique I hear is, well, all of the information isn't on the disc, but with PlayStation it is. Well, There's a website called Does It Play? You can go there, you can type in the name of a game, and they'll tell you if you need to access the internet one time to download a patch and then play it offline, or you don't require connecting to the internet at all. And there are quite a few games on PlayStation that you require an online connection to download a patch to get it to play offline. Same thing with Microsoft and Xbox. There are quite a few games that you don't, and there are some games that you do. So it all comes down to this perception game. And I think PlayStation plays it brilliantly. I think the analogy of, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, Burger King versus dating you for a long, long time, treating you really well, but then eventually ending up wham, bam, thank you, ma'am is what Sony's going to do. I don't know. I just don't know. I didn't expect PlayStation 5 Pro to be something that pushed the PlayStation 5 over 4 million sales in a month. It's insane to me. But clearly, the largest audience in the console space is choosing PlayStation. Clearly, that has an advantage that trumps any advantage that Xbox can talk about when it comes to Game Pass or the value of games in the service or backwards compatibility or access to old stuff. All of that stuff that I see as a strength really doesn't matter because a majority of people in the market don't care about it. And that's where we are when it comes to Xbox. So this was a test to see if this would work. I'm surprised 2 people showed up, 3 people, I think. Thanks to Megatron1 for popping in and telling me that it sounded okay. So yeah, hopefully I can do more of these, but that's where I am. I'm sort of rediscovering the fun that I can have on Xbox at a time where it's very, very difficult to be positive about the future of Xbox because I'm just an old guy who likes consoles. That's it. So if there's a future for a brand that may be beyond console, I'm not very excited about that. And it makes me not want to turn on that system. As crazy as that sounds, as juvenile as that sounds, that's just how I am. So that's where we are with Xbox. Thanks for popping in here, Megatron1, and letting me know that everything sounded okay. I'm going to end it now, and maybe in the future I'll figure this out, the streaming app, and I can do a little bit more things, maybe invite somebody in here. So that's the end of this test stream. Take it easy.